Marvel's first solo film to feature a heroine was heralded with much controversy leading up to release. Was it worth all the hubbub, or is it just another MCU film? Find out when Johnnie Torch reviews Captain Marvel. Well, welcome back, everybody, once again to another Johnnie Torch live broadcast. Today we're taking on, in a spoiler edition, Captain Marvel. As usually the case, I'll give my thoughts in a spoiler free sort of brief encapsulation here at the beginning. And I'd encourage you to return after you've seen the movie, or, of course, if you just don't care about spoilers, you can continue on. But in a two-word summation, I would probably say Captain Marvel is remarkably unremarkable. That's not to say it's bad. I would say it's very run-of-the-mill, very routine. There was nothing really about it that made me blown away or seriously considering how I, need to see it again and to try to understand something that, it didn't really resonate with me, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I felt very much like I did after seeing Black Panther. Um, I would say Black Panther is a better movie, and we'll get into the reasons why in a minute. But this does seem like Marvel knows how to do its characters. And this felt like a Captain Marvel movie in the same way the Black Panther felt like a Black Panther movie. But when we are now on the C-list characters, it honestly it's to borrow a sort of a television cliche. It's not must-see TV anymore, if that makes any sense to you. And again, this could be because I'm not the target demo audience. Black Panther was obviously intended for its audience. Captain Marvel was also pushing very strongly for its audience, but I'm not sure that that's enough to sustain the MCU going forward. In fact, just today, before I did the broadcast, before we started this broadcast, the Shang-Chi feature film has gotten a director. And that's what I mean. It's sort of like now we're on the third tier characters. And it seems more that the push for diversity is there. And that seems to be where they're tent poling these, final wave of up and coming superheroes to join Avengers. All right. So anyhow, with that in mind, it was a fun movie, serviceable, and like I said, really fairly unremarkable, which is not necessarily a bad film make, but that's probably where I'll have to leave it. Okay, so now, full spoiler mode. We're going to dive deep, and I want to try to keep this video tight. We usually go about an hour, so, me being long-winded as I am, I'm sure we'll get there as well, but I'm going to try to not let this one spiral out of control. By the way, I'm your host, Johnnie Torch, with my watery iced coffee again in tow. And we will have the chat room open in case anybody shows up, which is always fun, but is usually not the case. But let me know what you think about Captain Marvel in the comments below if you have indeed watched this review on the rebroadcast, so to speak. All right, so starting off, I would say that let's take a look back. And again, I don't have any notes. When I do these live streams, I just go from stream of consciousness. I don't want to say I have a photographic memory, but I sort of replay the movie in my mind as I'm talking about it. So we sort of take it sequentially. So first, before we actually get to the movie proper, I think it's only fair that we look at some of the history of the film because, of course, there was a lot of controversy surrounding this one, a lot of people wanting to boycott it, a lot of people finding Brie Larson to be somewhat abrasive, as I've said, because of her sort of leftist, uh, leanings or her sort of abrasive personality when it comes to feminism and so forth, and calling this film her feminism movie or feminist statement. And me, I personally don't let that affect me. I firmly put the stars and cast and crew's political beliefs on the shelf. It doesn't affect me in one way whatsoever. If I were to have it affect me, I would boycott Avengers, because you have Chris Evans, Mark Ruffalo. I'm sure many of the cast, if not all of them, are left of center and are outspokenly left. So that doesn't affect me politically, what they have to say. So that really wasn't an issue in my mind, to say the least. I kept neutral on this whole controversy. I said, don't boycott this film. If it's going to be SJW propaganda or feminist propaganda, see it first and then criticize. That was my take. For better for worse, if you agree or disagree, that was my take, and that's what I was going to do. So being able to divorce myself from the hoopla that had surrounded the film leading up to it, I came into it with fresh eyes and just, as always, with the expectation of being entertained. First and foremost, that's all I want you to do. We'll talk about the feminist and SJW trappings of it in a moment. First, let's take a look at that Stan Lee tribute, which I thought was very nice. Very nice. Let's see. We got somebody in the chat room. Let me see. Let's see. Hunter Iggy. The rumors going around that WB developed Justice Society of America. Go check out Heroes Avenue. New video just came out. Okay, thanks a lot about that. I'll check that out when we're done with the review. So the Stan Lee tribute was very moving, very touching. My audience that I was with was very receptive of it. Where, of course, this is the spoiler review, so we're going to get into it. But they took all of Stan's cameos, at least the ones in the MCU, and sort of put them in the opening montage that opens the films. And they dedicated the film to Stan, which of course was very nice. And I felt I gave him a lot of respect. And I'm not sure. I don't believe Captain Marvel was created. At least not the Carol Danvers version was created by Stan. But again, they gave him a lot of respect, so that was cool. While we're on the subject, they had the Stan Lee cameo. Of course, I don't think we're going to have too many of those left. I think, as far as I know, Endgame is going to have the last Stan cameo. But this one was, was pretty cool. This was set in the 90s, of course, and it has Stan, I think, probably for the first time in the MCU anyway, portraying himself as he's reading the Mallrat script. And we get to hear Stan say "true believer," which I think is probably the first time in a cameo where he uses that, one of his catchphrases. So that was cool. It was a nice tribute to Stan, and it made, everybody have a great reaction in the audience. Um, and it was also kind of cool. They had Captain Marvel giving him sort of the knowing look. That was pretty nice. All right, so let's talk about the story proper. I was very interested in the concept of Captain Marvel and the amnesia. I'm trying to think of the word, the amnesia plot here. And I don't think that's something that was really part of the Carol Danvers storyline. Again, I'm going to state right off the bat, fully I'm not fully into the background of Captain Marvel. I know the basics, but I don't know the full history. So again, this might be why I'm slightly more receptive to the film than others who are, you know, dyed in the wool fans. But so Captain Marvel, who's called Veers in this film, which I thought that was kind of clever, the way they got that name being her badge. The only surviving piece of her name tag or whatever was Veers. And she's working for the Kree Empire and is part of a sort of a task force named, I think, Star Force. I can't remember. I don't have copious notes ahead in front of me. Enter Jan Vogue. I believe that's his name. Let me see. I do have that written down somewhere. Who is, of course, Jude Law. Yeah, Jan Rogg, excuse me. and I kept forgetting his name. I kept calling him Jude Law, Jude Law with yellow eyes. But he is the sort of team commander. He's sort of the team leader, and is sort of the, I guess you would say, the I don't know, the closest confidant she has. That's one of the problems I have with the film. We'll get to that in a second, but I'm just setting the stage here. Uh, she's working for the Kree, of course. They have a long-standing war with the Skrulls, and uh, in the course of battle, finds herself in Earth, and in the 1990s, comes across a younger Nick Fury, sans eye patch, and we are introduced, of course, to a young and, I guess technically, like first day on the job, Phil Coulson. He got the biggest response, I think, from the audience. Everybody loved seeing Coulson on the big screen again. Of course, you could still catch him in Agents of Shield. Whether he'll still be Coulson in that this coming season is subject to detail at this time. But and this takes her on an adventure to discover her past and remember her identity. And that's basically the synopsis. So let's start with, let's see, let's take it. My problems, I think, with it, and I think everybody's going to know what my biggest problem is. Now, we'll start with the Supreme Intelligence. The Supreme Intelligence, of course, summons her in the Kree army, or whatever you want to call them, and she is supposed to see whoever is her greatest inspiration, or whoever she looks up to the most, something of that nature. And it's Annette Bening, and she doesn't know who she is because she doesn't remember. And come to find out, we'll skip around a bit here, but by the end of the movie, we find out that that is Marvel, who, of course, as fans would know, and even someone like me who doesn't know the comics very well, know that that is the original Captain Marvel. Gender changed. Now, of course, I don't like gender changing characters. I don't like race changing characters. So I didn't really cotton to this change very much at all. And I think this is where we'll start talking about, like, sort of the SJW things. This, I guess, could be tied to that, having to sort of make her hero a female. And that felt very transparent. Like, that was something that was done only to appeal to sort of a feminist agenda. Um, they could have very easily made it a male character, and they wouldn't have risked the ire of purists like myself, and would have kept it still very much on the path of what the original Captain Marvel storyline was. But going onward with the SJW politics, though, it was very much like, let's see, I got another in the comments here. Hunter Iggy says, "Do you think Kevin Feige is SJW?" That is, I don't know. I honestly don't believe so, but it seems to me like they're out of stories to tell. They seem like they're working now towards putting the characters in that are, like I said, with a target demographic in mind. Like I said, the Shang-Chi movie is coming out, and we already had Black Panther. We already have Captain Marvel, which is sort of the feminist movie. And the Eternals is supposed to have a gay lead actor. I mean, now it seems to me like they're focusing on demographic targeting, and that's a very SJW thing. I don't know if that's something that he's consciously doing, uh, thinking that's a good money making move, for lack of a better term, but that does seem to be the way that the MCU is heading now. So I honestly don't know. I do have to say, though, I'm going to. I got a lot to talk about with this movie, so I'm probably not going to engage with the chat too much until the end. I feel bad because I start getting sidetracked, and historically, I'll be all over the place. So let me just let me make my finer points, and then I'll go back to the chat. And if you can't stick with me, that's fine. I'll just read the chat at the end. You can come back and read the end of it. But um, yeah. So let me focus on the SJW problems with the film. As I said on Twitter, I gave a non-spoiler quick review, and I said I think the on the pain index, the SJW tendencies were sort of first season Supergirl. If you've seen first season Supergirl, it was very feminist in its the character of Cat Grant and the sort of, rah rah girl power, girls can do it all, and there was the occasional "oh, men are such jerks" moments. And I think that's probably where the SJW stuff lies in the Captain Marvel movie. I think it's tolerable. I didn't feel like there was like maybe two times I rolled my eyes, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But I don't really feel like this was sort of beating you over the head. I think this was more just I went in knowing that's what they were going to do, and they did it. So I don't know. It didn't surprise me, or it didn't. I wasn't put off by it. Let me put it that way. Um, the worst scene in the film for me was they actually, and this was a big controversy surrounding the movie before the movie even took off. In the first trailer, there was the whole thing about why doesn't she smile more? Brie Larson's a plank of wood, and would it kill her to smile? And my least favorite part of the whole movie is when they actually had a scene to highlight that, when there's like a biker guy going to a bar or whatever, and he's like, "Hey, why don't you smile?" And he's sort of like a typical jerk trying to hit on her or whatever. And to their credit, they didn't make it like some kind of feminist fantasy where she like gets up, grabs the guy by the throat and throws him through a window. She just basically ignores him and then steals his bike. But I kind of felt like, I'm so tired of this "you should smile" trope. I mean, in both sides. I mean, I didn't really feel like there was a problem with Brie Larson in the trailer. I didn't really have a problem with her in this movie at all. We'll get to her performance in a couple of minutes too. But highlighting it like that, it made it feel even more, it felt artificially put in there. It didn't feel like something that was like necessary for the movie. It's just like something they had to have like on a checklist where they like had to deal with the, sort of the jock, and we also had like there was like one scene of like I think they ran this scene like maybe two or three times where we have like the male pilots or cadets, whatever they were at that point, sort of mocking her and sort of goading her on that she, couldn't do the obstacle course, and basically, mocking her on the bar and stuff. And that was like stuff that probably wasn't needed. I mean, we really didn't need that in order to appreciate that Carol, quote unquote, made it on her own. But again, they sort of felt the need to go there. But like I said, those are the things that I didn't like, but I took them all in stride. It really didn't ruin the movie for me. I think I think the worst, trying to put my finger on it, besides the fact that Marvel was gender changed for this movie, I think the thing that was the biggest problem for me was there was a lack of emotional attachment to Carol. I think the biggest problem is they were so afraid not to give her they were so afraid to give her a love interest that they sort of killed a lot of chances for drama. For instance, Jan Rog, I was expecting there to be some kind of emotional connection for her with him. Now, at first I said, well, this would be pretty cool if she does have a romantic relationship with him. And when inevitably, I think we all knew that he was going to be evil, he was going to betray her or whatever. And I was like, wow, that's a pretty cool emotional anchor to have. And then I quickly realized they're not going to do that because that's, for those of you that don't know, there was a con, you know, a controversial story in the early 80s called The Rape of Ms. Marvel, where she was basically brainwashed and sort of like at the mercy of a villain. I'm not going to go into that whole thing. I'm sure I've talked about it before, but I'm sure you either know it or can read up on it. And so I felt like that's going to hew a little closely with what happened there. And knowing the MCU, they don't want to go there. They didn't want to have Hank Pym as Ant-Man because they didn't want to deal with the whole controversy about the slapping Janet stuff. So they definitely weren't going to go with Jan Rog being a lover. But I think that killed a lot of the emotional connection because you don't really get the sense of her feeling betrayed. I mean, if she had some people or at least one person that she cared about in the Star Force, it would have felt more emotionally resonant. I don't feel that there was anything emotionally resonant about it. Now, thinking back, they probably also could have used Jan Rog as a brother figure because they did seem somewhat close, if platonic. And had they sort of said, well, she looks up to him like an older brother, and he was doing everything he could to train her, and he actually felt something for her, even as in a brotherly sense, it would have made some emotional ties between them. But again, that's kind of where the SJW stuff comes in. She don't need no man, and you really can't have her have emotional connections to another man in this film. And I think that was a big missed opportunity, and I blame the SJW stuff for that. But it's not entirely on the Kree side of things. I think also there was a lack of her having ties to humanity. We got a uh, close connection between her and Maria Rambeau, but we really don't get a good sense of her family and where she came from. Again, there was this sort of heavy-handed flashbacks of her as a child and sort of being told no by her father or whatever, that she shouldn't be in the soapbox derby or whatever it was, and that she had to keep rising to the occasion as a child during, little league and all that kind of stuff like that. There, it was kind of heavy-handed, but we really didn't get a sense of her family. All we know is that I think Monica says something along the lines of, you didn't have a close relationship with your family, when she's trying to remind her of her past. So again, I didn't really feel like we had a huge emotional connection to Carol, and I think that robbed a lot of the emotional punch to it. I said in the on Twitter in my spoiler-free review, the film needed some bite to it, and I think that's what I meant by that statement. It needed to be a hook as to, she's sort of a child of two worlds, and you needed to see what each world offered her. And instead, it kind of was just like a muddy mix of, she was a victim in both worlds. She wasn't really, it's like more or less she was done dirty by both worlds. You know what I mean? She really didn't belong in either world, and I guess that's the message they were trying to put out. But um, it didn't feel like it was a triumph that she returned to Earth, and reclaimed her humanity, and it didn't feel like she lost anything by leaving the Kree. So I think that was my biggest sort of regret and disappointment, that I don't think they took full advantage of the amnesia subplot, that they could have played with it a lot more, um, made a lot more use of it. There was a lot of slow parts in the film. There was a lot of the pacing was stodgy and pretty uninspired at times. But again, on the plus side, I thought Brie Larson pretty much carried off what I thought of Captain Marvel, for good and for bad. Now, like I said, I have sort of limited knowledge of Captain Marvel. I read Avengers comics and a few of the earlier Ms. Marvel comics from I don't know, what was the early 2000s. And Captain Marvel, like I said, a lot of people want to, again, we're still sticking with this feminist uh, trappings, but Ms. Marvel, for some context, was actually created as a feminist hero. And in the 70s, they ran with that when she was created. And so to completely divorce her from her feminist background, it's not it's not entirely possible. I don't think. I think even Wonder Woman was victim to that. The character, I'm saying, in the '70s, where feminists look toward her as their icon, and in the same way here, I think uh, Miss Marvel has her roots in feminism, and so you can't completely strip her of that. But having said that, I do think that Ms. Marvel slash Captain Marvel is kind ofly a kind of I'm trying to think of the right term, sort of charismally challenged. I don't know that Ms. Marvel, or as I said, Captain Marvel now in the movie. I think that Brie Larson portrayed her well, but I think the character herself does not have the kind of charisma that will carry a feature film unless, like I said, they tried to appeal to some more emotional beats. Because basically all we know about her is she's dedicated and has some surface level sassiness. Um, when you think of Iron Man, you think of Robert Downey Jr.'s, snark and sort of the lovable jerk. When you think of Captain America, he's sort of the bold, altruistic hero. Thor is sort of a vain demigod that, finds empathy with humanity. I don't know where you would place Carol Danvers when you want to sort of put her on the Avengers roster as a lead member. I don't really know that she has that kind of charisma to do that. And again, that's not entirely the fault of Brie Larson. That's kind of on the character. Okay, so let's talk about some of the other stuff. That's pretty much where it's at. But let's talk about some of the cool things. We got to see Clark Gregg return as Phil Coulson. That was a lot of fun. Samuel L. Jackson had a pretty big role in this film, which was cool. I was kind of dubious as to what they were going to do with him. Uh, because I don't know if I could see a young Nick Fury. I mean, we're saying a young Nick Fury here. He's like supposed to be 45 years old or something, but um, he sort of still had the surface traits of Nick Fury, but again was sort of more laid back, which was kind of cool. And we get to see how he got the eye patch, which a lot of people didn't like it. It didn't bother me really. I think, there are some things you can use for humor and it doesn't work, and there are some things you can use for humor and it works. Like, for instance, a lot of people don't like that Boba Fett goes down because Han Solo, hits him behind his back and sends him into the Sarlacc. This was that kind of joke where it was like, well, you thought it was some kind of Kree torture or something, like Coulson says, and it turns out to be just a cat swipe. But I don't know. It didn't bother me. I thought it made me laugh. So in effect, it worked for me. Yeah, we'll talk about Goose the cat for a moment. Goose, a lot of people were hinging a lot of the success of this film on Goose and acting like Goose was the greatest thing in the film. I thought he was amusing. I don't know that I would say, because from the way people talked about him, I thought he was going to be another Rocket Raccoon or some kind of swerve at the end where he would sort of manifest into something else, which he does, but it's more low key than what I was expecting. But yeah, that was an amusing part. Let's talk about Ben Mendelsohn and Talos, the main, quote unquote, the main antagonist. This is what we were led to believe anyway. This was the biggest swerve. I One of the things I complained about it being sort of unremarkable is that it's very much by the numbers, and you see everything before it comes. But I was, of course, pretty surprised that they chose to make the Skrulls so they're basically the heroes in this film. And Ben Mendelsohn gives a great performance. Everybody, of course, expecting him to be another sneering villain, which is what he's made his bread and butter on for so many years now. But he's actually a sort of multi-layered character here. He's a a soldier. He's a husband and father, and sort of a a refugee leader. And that was a nice swerve, but my only concern about that going forward is, as we know from the comics, the Skrulls are, I mean, they're co-villains. The Kree are not, heroic to be sure, but the Skrulls are usually pretty evil, and they are like, I don't want to say the main adversary of the Fantastic Four, but they are a major adversary of the Fantastic Four. So the Fantastic Four coming into the MCU, one would think you'd want to use them in some capacity in a Fantastic Four movie, a potential Fantastic Four movie. So I don't really know what they're going to do going forward. Of course, this is only a small refugee sample, so they still have the door open to do something with them in a secret invasion storyline or something. But that kind of threw me for a loop. I didn't really know what to make of that. Uh, but yeah, that was a lot of fun. Ben Mendelsohn was a lot of fun in this film. I want to talk about Maria Rambeau for a second as well. Uh, I thought she did good. Of course, we're introduced to Monica Rambeau, who is she's the technically the second Captain Marvel, although I think it's fair to say she'll be the third Captain Marvel because sort of retroactively we're making Carol Danvers the second Captain Marvel. That's if Marvel is considered a captain in this film. I'm not sure. They never really designated that, making her a scientist. They didn't ever refer to her as Captain Marvel, Carol, which is strange. Like I said, it felt like a very hodgepodge of story elements. It felt very sloppy in a way. For example, I don't know when is she ever discovered to be Carol Danvers? I don't remember that. Was it when she was looking through the files in the library section there, or was it when she was talking to Monica? I can't remember. That's kind of how unimpactful it was. She's just sort of discovered to be Carol Danvers, and she sort of just pieces together, let me talk to Maria Rambeau because she knew me. Like I said, there really wasn't no emotional core to the film of self-discovery. It felt sort of perfunctory to me, anyway. I think the most emotional moment of the film does come at that point where Monica is showing her through the photographs, the old photographs, and she's saying, "This is your, childhood photos. This is you and me on Halloween. This is, you know, going through memories." And that to me was the most emotional. You could feel that someone that cared about her from the past was deeply trying to reconnect with her. The scene with Maria a little bit later, where Captain Marvel does finally betray some emotion and starts, openly crying. I don't think that didn't work as well for me. I think it would have worked better had that happened with Monica, because it felt more like speechifying. It was like, "Oh, you're such a great person. When I knew you, you were a wonderful person, and you're still a wonderful person." But we don't really know Carol from when she was that wonderful person. We've only got two or three flashbacks to attest to that. And those flashbacks are so brief and uneventful. Probably the one with her and Maria. I think it's at the beginning of the film when the Skrulls are sort of reading her mind. That was the only time we really see her in a flashback that is not just a clip of disjointed images. So that was, I think, the emotional part that should have been elaborated on. I don't know if they're going to have any deleted scenes that would flesh out some of these things, because I did see in the trailers they had some scenes that weren't in the movie or in behind the scenes pictures. Like, for instance, Ronan the Accuser, I think, was supposed to be with Jan Rog, and that never happened in the movie, as far as I know. I think he spoke to him in hologram form, but that was about it. And yeah, let's talk about some of the Easter eggs. We got Jan Rog, we got Koran from Guardians of the Galaxy, which was cool. We didn't really see anything definitive with Koran, I don't know how you pronounce it, but and because I thought that maybe we would see how he got like loboticized, because he got that kind of Lobot thing going on in Guardians. Basically, it's just a cool nod that, yeah, we're in the cosmic universe. Remember him from Guardians. That's pretty cool. Or if you watch this narratively, like I probably would do, I'd probably watch this before Guardians. Then you'll see where he winds up. We get Ronan the Accuser, which I was excited for that they could flesh him out. They did literally nothing with him. He has a couple of hologram scenes where he's sort of giving orders, and then he stands at the window at the end when Captain Marvel's finally cutting loose and doing her thing, and he sort of leaves some sequel bait, I guess, of let's see if we can get her next time. Sort of like I'll get you Gadget next time. Dr. Claw stuff. So that was funny, but it was amusing. Let's put it that way. Uh, let's talk about some of the controversies in the timeline. A lot of people were complaining that this messes up some of the MCU timeline, which the timeline has been pretty well taken care of in the MCU. They don't really make too many mistakes, but a lot of people are saying, well, the Tesseract is introduced, and we know from First Avenger that um, Howard Stark finds the Tesseract after the Red Skull loses it on the plane that Steve goes down in. This doesn't do anything to really spoil that. I don't think it didn't really bother me. I don't think we needed the Tesseract involved in the storyline, but I guess the idea is that, well, it plays a bigger part in Shield because it was involved in this movie, and it sort of puts a priority on its importance. It's not really a big issue, but there it is. We also have Nick making the I think it's called the Protector Initiative at first, when he realizes that there are other superpowered beings out there that could help protect the Earth, and when he sees the inscription on Carol's plane, that says Avenger, he calls it the Avenger Initiative after that. And a lot of people are complaining because Captain America, the first Avenger, is called the first Avenger, even though in the film, Captain America is not called an Avenger, but he's considered the first Avenger because, hello, he exists in World War II. So, yeah, I can see that kind of like, you know, risking the ire of some fans because you're not kind of giving Cap his due, Captain America, but at the same time, you know, Nick didn't meet Captain America at this point, so it doesn't really mess with continuity that much. It's more just sort of, I think some people didn't like that as being sort of a slap in the face to Captain America being sort of the first Avenger. As far as other timeline things that are mucked up, I think the whole concept of Nick wanting to create an Avengers initiative this early is kind of strange. The movie is set in 1995, so he would have to wait a good, I don't know, 12 years or so. I don't know exactly. I think the MCU, the first, phase one sort of all takes place around 2008. So, like I said, we're looking at a good 12 years or something where he's waiting around before he starts handing out, invitations to the Avengers Initiative. It does seem a little off time wise, and again, with Phil Coulson sort of in Iron Man stumbling around the term Shield, strategic homeland intervention, blah blah blah. And by the end of that, they go with the acronym Shield. In this, they're sort of already calling it Shield from the get go. So it's like, was Phil sort of trying to pull, Tony's leg and stuff with those kind of, knowing Coulson, it could be, he was, he was sort of at that level, with his wit. So I guess you can look at it that way. But again, these are some of the things where the nitpicks come in. You're kind of concerned. Also, I think another one was Nick talks about how in Avengers that Thor was sort of the reason behind the Avenger Initiative because you know there's a uh, there's a galactic sense of war coming. Even Thor says this, that a higher form of war led the Chitauri to Earth. It's interesting, but again, Nick Fury says what Nick Fury says when he says it. You know, this is the same guy that put, Coulson's blood on Captain America's trading cards. You know what I mean? He says what he needs to say when he needs to say it. I don't. So at the end of the day, I don't think there was any real controversies that couldn't be explained away. Again, let's see. Going through the story, let's see if we covered everything. Yeah, there was no real personality given to the Star Force members. I think the female member, I can look up her name. I don't know what her name was. Let's see. Doctor. I can't read it. Dr. Minerva, something like that. She was the one that was given sort of any serious lines, and again, that kind of goes to my point of how she didn't have any real ties to these people, because she says to Minerva, you knew this all the time and you didn't tell me. And Minerva's sort of like, yeah, but to be honest, I never really liked you. So it's like there was no real camaraderie between her and her team. There was only sort of again, I don't know how you would designate what she was to Jan Rog. I guess he was sort of taken with her as being someone he could control, and she wasn't really a personality to him, although it didn't seem that way when they started out the movie. So again, I don't know. And then so at the ending, we'll get right to the ending now, where she confronts him. There really is no emotional weight to it. There's no stakes other than he'd done her wrong, but purely in typical bad guy fashion. It could have been anybody who had done this. In fact, if it had been Ronan the Accuser, it probably would have felt more earned, because we have this Rog sort of being her chief confidant, and still neither of them having any kind of emotional relationship, or even a friendship. So anyhow, the ending battle, we'll talk about that for a second, where she finally confronts the Supreme Intelligence, and she that was kind of whack. I didn't really, from what I understand, Supreme Intelligence is sort of like, they have like big heads. Again, I don't really remember too much about this from the comic, but I think the Kree Intelligence was like two or three big heads where they gather around a room and they make important decisions and send their warriors out to battle. And in this case, making it Annette Bening was, you know, kind of wacky. I don't know if that was the smartest choice. Again, I think a large disrespect to Marvel by not only gender changing him, but they didn't really connect. She really didn't come to know Marvel. We're supposed to believe that she had some kind of emotional connection to her, and that's the reason why we see her as her, greatest, inspiration or whatever when she sees the Supreme Intelligence. But we really don't have anything to base that on either, other than she sort of like, I don't know, had a day where she came up to her and said, "Hey, how are you going to take off?" or whatever that scene was. Again, it doesn't feel like there's an emotional core to the film. I guess I'm repeating myself at this point, but in all directions, it really, I don't know, it didn't really hit the spot in that way. The final battle was cool. I thought the action scenes were very good. Some of them were a little bit tough to make out, but for the most part, I thought it was good. The final battle there with Jan Rog, where she does an Indiana Jones on him, where he's like, fight me without your powers," and she just blasts him and he goes flying. And again, that's sort of a feminist coda. It kind of reminded me of Black Panther, where Killmonger does the whole, bury me with my ancestors, and in the sea, that like they came over in slave ships. It kind of felt too on the nose, it kind of felt like they were saying, okay, he's at his core a macho guy that wants to prove that he can take out Captain Marvel, and she don't have to prove anything, so she's just going to take him out simply. You know, it's kind of like that. You know, it did feel kind of preachy. Although, like I said, in Black Panther, I think it was a little bit more preachy, to be honest with you. As I said at the beginning of the review, I think comparing this to Black Panther, they did use some of the same beats, some of the same approaches to the material. I think I would probably say, now you see, I was more invested with Captain Marvel. I would say I I really wanted it to, that's kind of what my problem was. I wanted it to go further than it did. It didn't really take off to the next level. Black Panther, on the other hand, delivered. It had an emotional core. You had, T'Challa and his father. You had Killmonger and his father. You had T'Challa's mother and sister having to sort of pick up the slack when T'Challa goes down. There was an emotional core to that film that I think was somewhat lacking in this one. And that's why I think I would put these two films closely in my, if we're going to rank the Marvel movies now, which I haven't done again since, I don't know if did I do it for Infinity War? I think I might have done it for before Infinity War, but this probably is around Black Panther. Black Panther for me, out of the 21 films now, I put Black Panther, like, I forget, like 14, 15. Not the worst, but it's sort of more serviceable. And I would probably put this one around that area too, probably just behind Black Panther at 15, maybe 15 or 16. Because again, it's sort of it does justice to its titular protagonist, but it doesn't take off to that next level. I think, like I said, if push come to shove, I think Black Panther did, but I don't think this one really does. Again, hopefully, on a second viewing, I really hope that this will sort of impress me a little bit more. But again, it's serviceable, it's fun. I like Brie Larson's portrayal of Carol Danvers. It felt genuine. Her relationship with Monica Rambeau was pretty cool. I think her letting her, Carol letting Monica choose the colors for her uniform was a very cool scene. And it's something that they didn't get to do with Wonder Woman, which you have the female protagonist connecting with a young girl, which in a way I think is important because because you don't want it to get too preachy, but at the same time, you want to get the sense that the female hero is nurturing. And again, that's another beat that they used with Black Panther, where, T'Challa wants to give something back to the Black community. He comes back at the end and is trying to facilitate, schools or whatever it is for the underprivileged. So, it's kind of, again, I don't want it to make it feel like it's just a beat there for the sake of it, but I thought it was pretty cool, if you want to look at it in that way, that it wasn't just a stereotypical beat that they had to throw in, but it did feel like it made her more of a person that they might have missed out on if they didn't do that. Let me talk briefly for a second here. I also got the name of the composer, because I thought the music was pretty good in this film. Pinar Toprak. So it felt very much like, I would say, Ragnarok-ish. Not entirely electronic, but there was some cool moments where it felt like it had that Guardians of the Galaxy sort of Ragnarok score. That was pretty cool. Yeah, let's talk about the music, the 90s setting. We got a couple of good jokes out of the fact that the internet was so slow in the 90s, which only some of us would remember. Not me, of course, because I was too young. No, actually, the soundtrack was primarily 90s music. And to be honest with you, as a teenager in the 90s, you would expect me to love 90s music because that's what I was growing up with, and and that would make its impression on me. But I hated 90s music. I hated most 90s music. I never liked grunge, never was crazy for hip hop. So that's mostly what you get here, is sort of the you get a little Nirvana, which was all right. I mean, I didn't hate Nirvana. If I had to name a grunge band that I liked, I mean, Nirvana was cool, but yeah, I never really liked Nirvana. I never really liked grunge. And then you had TLC and No Doubt, which was kind of okay on the pop side. Eh, again, I'm more of sort of 80s music. So if they could have done a film where 80s music could have took precedence, it probably would have meant more to me. But I mean, if you're a 90s baby like I was, and growing up in the 90s, you probably appreciate some of this music a little better than I did. But again, as a period piece, it was pretty cool, to have something like that. Again, this was sort of set in the 90s just to sort of put Carol at a disadvantage. That's the real reason why it's set in the 90s, because everybody would kind of say, well, we've made some strides since then, she shouldn't be looked down to by her, cadet peers or whatever. But it is what it is. And another thing that's been criticized is Captain Marvel's powers not being greatly defined. She sort of cuts loose from the inhibitor chip on her neck, and she just kind of has powers. And that's true. That is kind of a problem. I think it's not really a big issue with me. It's kind of like her powers are being strong, can fly, and shoot blasts out of her hands. I mean, she's basically Superman, but can also shoot blasts out of her hands, sort of like Dragon Ball Z. I mean, if that's all it is, that's fine. I mean, they established that a little bit better than they established Scarlet Witch's powers. So, there's that. So again, I really can't go too hard on this film other than it was slightly underwhelming. It had all the pieces there to be more exciting than it was, is the way I think I'll describe it. And like I said, we'll talk about going forward now. Let's talk about the post-credit scenes. Of course, the last post-credit scene was Goose the cat hairballing up the Tesseract, which was humorous. If you like cat humor, I'm sure you appreciated it. But the more exciting scene, of course, was the one that is probably a scene from Endgame, where Cap and Black Widow and I think Banner's there, and Rhodey, and they've got the Captain Marvel beacon, or whatever you want to call that, that Samuel L. Jackson. We actually see it in the movie where Captain Marvel hands it to him as sort of a homing beacon to send a message to her if she's needed. And that in itself is another bit of controversy. People are saying, well, why didn't he call her back? And, there's any number of 1,000 reasons. I mean, they connected the dots as to how Nick Fury got the Tesseract. I'm sure they could connect dots as to why he didn't call Captain Marvel, or why Captain Marvel was too busy to respond to the call if he did call. But yeah, so at the end of the movie, Carol goes back to sort of safeguard the Skrulls on their journey toward whatever safe haven they're going to find. And the Avengers find the homing beacon apparently after Nick goes up in ash, and it's pretty cool that the Cap is like, send the single again, send it again, and then Black Widow turns around and Captain Marvel's right there, and she's got slightly longer hair, which was nice. And she says, "Where's Nick Fury?" That's pretty cool. That got me excited. And I think going forward with Captain Marvel, I think she's a character that's probably going to do better. And I think this is true of her in the comics as well. I think at her best, she does better in the Avengers. I think she's going to be good bouncing off of other characters. Seeing her interact with other characters would probably be the way to really do something with the character. And yeah, I can see. I'm trying to think of what they could do in a Captain Marvel 2, should they do one. Obviously, when she comes back, I don't know if they would set the next one in the 90s. I guess they left that open when they had Ronan the Accuser sort of make his "I'll be back" statement. They definitely will bring Monica Rambeau up in age to sort of fit the narrative. I don't know about. I don't know. Does her Kree powers cause her to not age? Because I thought that was interesting. She comes back after like 15 years, not looking a day older. And when you've gone through the trouble of de-aging Samuel L. Jackson and Phil Coulson, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Whatever. Also, it's kind of weird she doesn't need the mask anymore to breathe in space, which that's fine with me because I never liked, like when they put Superman in a mask when he has to breathe in space and stuff. It's like, all right, come on, he's got all the powers in the world. You don't put him in a mask and make him breathe in space. But they kind of also didn't define that. That wasn't a discovery moment for her. You know what I mean? They kind of glossed over a lot of things to sort of get where they were, and that's kind of the point I'm making about my problems with the film. They could have focused in on a lot of things a lot more, and the things they focused on sort of was just long and sort of dragged down the movie in a couple places where they could have just sort of they could have put the focus on something else that would be more informative than just sort of trying to give us information drops about the Kree Skull War and stuff. And I mean, it might have been a little more interesting that way. All right, so let's see. In closing, do you have any final thoughts here? Let me take a look at the chat. If anybody is still in the chat, sorry for taking so long. Let's see. Squib says, "Yo, I wasn't surprised by it either. It seems cool to me to think about if Carol was Russo'd. I thought Jude Law was Marvel at first. Yeah. I think a lot of us thought that Jude Law was going to be Marvel. I wish he was Marvel. But the thing is, it kind of makes you wonder what they would have done to the character. I mean, would they have made him a villain? That's what I would have been afraid of if they actually made him Marvel. But I was disappointed that they didn't go with the traditional male Marvel. That they didn't sort of make him her mentor, which would have you know gone against their she don't need no man narrative, which I understand is what they were going to do. But yeah, so thank you, Hunter Iggy, and thank you, Squib, for joining us. And if you have any more comments, please let me know and put them in the comments below, and we'll talk about it. And, on another broadcast, I will read those comments on the air live. Yes, on the air live. Giving this a rating, let us see. Let me take a sip of my coffee before we go. Oh, is that watery? Okay. Let's see. I'm going to have to sadly give this one 3.5 stars out of 5. That's 3.5 stars out of 5 for Captain Marvel. And again, like I said, this is purely based on the movie. I don't dislike Brie Larson, and I think she did great in the role. I think they could have gotten more to the heart of the story to give us a little more emotional depth, a little more oomph to the story. Um, Oh, as I was saying, I think they're probably gonna put Monica Rambeau in the next movie. But the problem is Captain Marvel to me is not really like a legacy character. I mean, they're gonna probably make Monica Photon or whatever any of her other aliases were, which would be sort of making her the equivalent of like Rhodey or something. But I could see going forward, they're probably going to try to do all kinds of things like that. I think that's a mistake. I think they should just sort of leave her with the Avengers, and if they do make a sequel, not to share not to share the space with other characters. And for those of you that I know, this is another thing that was sort of controversial. People saying that, oh, Monica Rambeau was the first Captain Marvel. This is they're trying to raise a stink because they're trying to say that, oh, they took a role away from a black actress who could have been Captain Marvel in order to make a white actress. Come on, give me a break. If you want to complain about anything, complain about the fact that they didn't give Marvel his own movie first, and then pass it on to Carol, and then pass it on to Monica. Don't give me this like everybody really wanted to see Monica Rambeau first. I mean, she's lower on the totem pole than Carol Danvers and Marvel. But again, I got nothing against the character. I never was particularly interested in the Monica Rambeau Captain Marvel because she was the Captain Marvel when I was a kid reading Avengers. Um, I always found Carol Danvers is the most compelling of those characters. Marvel isn't really that compelling, and the Rambeau Captain Marvel wasn't that compelling. I think the most compelling was Carol Danvers, and I think that's why she endures, not because she's white or a girl or whatever. I think she's clearly the most interesting of those options they had to make a movie with. So I don't begrudge them not starting with Marvel, but I do think that, like I said, they should have made him the mentor and sort of, and again, they were like, well, we can't do that. That's too close to Green Lantern. Well, Green Lantern, Green Lantern's mentor, uh, Abin Sur, died in like 90 seconds. You know what I mean? It's kind of different. I don't think they had to go that route. They could have made her have an actual mentor and not, because I don't know if Abin Sur would be considered a mentor. Um, he just sort of was the figurehead to get Hal started. All right, so once again, thank you for joining us. I think we made it just about an hour. So yeah, that's about all there is to say. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you excited about the prospects for Avengers Endgame? Spoil the heck out of Captain Marvel. Let me know what you thought. Do you agree with me on some of the points I made? Like I said, I still would recommend it. If you haven't seen it, see it. If you don't want to see it, don't see it. You probably won't have missed much when it comes to Endgame. It'll just familiarize you a little bit with the character before she's brought into Endgame. But again, if you don't care, you'll probably get all you need in Endgame regarding her, that she's, got powers and came from the 90s. All right, so until next we meet, this is Johnnie Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.